Hello and welcome to our climate risk briefing, El Niño as a stress test for business resilience. Today we intend to get behind the headlines, deep dive into the World Meteorological Organization or WMO's latest El Niño update, together with leading risk experts to understand what this really means for business. It's a pleasure to co-host this briefing with our partners and members. Co Barrett, the Deputy Secretary General of the WMO, Philippe Cotel, President of the Federation of European Risk Manager Associations, or FIRMA, and then Justin Struber, Climate Action Manager at Royal Philips. But why does this matter for business? As highlighted in our WBCSD CEO Guide to Physical Risk and Resilience in Value Chains last year, physical risk impacts are not a future issue. They are a present business reality. We are already seeing the impacts of physical risk events from extreme weather to longer-term chronic shifts in risk such as extreme heat, water stress, and ecosystem degradation. And these are already translating directly into operational and financial impacts for companies, not just within their perimeter of control, but especially out in their value chains, both upstream and downstream. And these impacts include damage to assets and infrastructure, disruption to those supply chains and logistics, business interruption and lost revenues, with increased costs and pressure on margins. So El Niño is really a stress test for business resilience, with changing weather patterns carried by El Niño challenging three things at once. First, visibility. Do companies really know where their climate exposures sit, not just in direct operations, but deeper in those value chains? Second, preparedness. Can your business really anticipate these disruptions that will be cascading across systems rather than arriving as isolated individual events? And third, adaptability. Can your business change its sourcing, its planning, and its operations fast enough in this more volatile environment? So today's briefing is really about moving from this awareness into action. We're going to learn what WMO is seeing in terms of how El Niño may unfold in the coming months, and then what this will mean for business. With that, I'll hand over to Co Barrett, Deputy Secretary General of WMO. Thank you, Co.
As businesses navigate an increasingly complex risk environment, one climate signal deserves particular attention in the months ahead: El Niño. El Niño is a naturally occurring climate pattern associated with unusually warm sea surface temperatures in the equatorial Pacific Ocean. It typically occurs every 2 to 7 years and is one phase of the El Niño Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, one of the most influential climate patterns on Earth. ENSO has two opposite phases. During El Niño, ocean temperatures in the central and eastern tropical Pacific are warmer than average, while during La Niña, they are cooler than average. These extremes in ocean temperatures influence atmospheric circulation and weather patterns around the world. We here at the World Meteorological Organization estimate there is an 80% probability that El Niño will emerge between June and August of 2026, rising to around 90% by the end of the year. Although some uncertainty remains about the strength of this El Niño, current forecasts indicate that it is likely to be at least moderate and potentially strong. Regardless, El Niño is expected to influence weather and climate patterns throughout the second half of 2026 and into 2027. So while El Niño begins in the Pacific, its impacts extend around the globe. Some regions may experience prolonged drought and water stress, others may face heavy rainfall and flooding. What makes this outlook especially important is the climate context in which it is unfolding. 2025 was the second or third warmest year on record, depending on the data set used. But this follows on 2024, which was the hottest year on record. Warmer sea surface temperatures associated with El Niño may contribute to further increases in global temperature in 2026 and in 2027, and can amplify associated impacts. Now, extreme heat is likely to be a significant concern in many areas, affecting worker safety, energy demand, productivity, and public health. Marine ecosystems and fisheries may also be disrupted, with implications for food systems and trade. However, no two El Niño events are exactly alike. Regional impacts can differ significantly, and other climate drivers also influence local conditions. Now, for businesses, the question is not simply whether an El Niño develops, but how its impacts manifest and interact with existing vulnerabilities across operations, supply chains, infrastructure, and markets. And because today's economy is deeply interconnected, localized climate shocks can trigger cascading impacts across business operations far from where the hazard first occurs. So this is why forecasts such as these should be viewed not simply as scientific updates, but as opportunities for action. They provide businesses with time to identify structural resilience gaps, strengthen risk visibility, improve cross-functional preparedness, and identify resilience-enhancing investments and financing options before impacts escalate. So at WMO, our role is to provide authoritative scientific information on weather, water, and climate. We coordinate the global exchange of Earth observation data and support early warnings that help societies anticipate and manage risk. With El Niño on the horizon, preparation and resilience are more important than ever. For the latest updates, follow WMO's El Niño La Niña updates and our monthly global seasonal climate updates, which incorporate additional climate drivers to provide more refined regional outlooks. The next El Niño Bulletin can be expected in early September. Thanks for your attention.
Hi. One thing which is important is to understand the translation about climate hazard into business impact. One example which comes into play is the flood. In 2020, everybody would remember the flood in Thailand, which completely jeopardized the automobile industry in the world. In 2024, flooding accounted for more than 70% of weather-related supply chain disruption, and there is no sign of improvement. Flooding disrupts supply chain in multiple different ways: infrastructure damage, facility shutdown, supplier vulnerability, and of course, insurance costs. Between 1981 and 2023, natural catastrophe events caused about 900 billion of direct economic losses within the EU. And 1/5 of that has occurred over the last 3 years alone. So the frequency and intensity of climate-driven natural disaster is increasing. And at the same time, the insurance protection gap is widening because of the increased risk caused by this climate change. Funding for preventive measures to avoid or reduce the impact of this crisis is sorely lacking. It's estimated that Europe faces a need of 477 billion in financing when it comes to climate resilience. There is clearly a shortfall in funding of those initiatives, while at the same time you see an insurance gap. So that's really why FERMA, we proposed together with WBCSD to launch the Open Sesame project. The purpose of this project is to promote investment in prevention towards natural catastrophe events, to be able to identify an unambiguous process helping companies to quantify their risk exposure, but also identify the mitigation measures, the project which would significantly reduce this exposure over the long term. This is the most efficient way to ensure long-term insurability of the risk, which is the best way to protect business and companies for the future. Beyond those technical aspects, we really wanted to explore the financial aspects of risk. First of all, to be able to identify the decision-making process, which would allow companies to see the financial return in the investment in prevention, but also to propose and develop new financial tools which would support this investment and be attractive for both investment funds and asset managers, as well as helping the decision-making process at company level. This is really the ambition of this large-scale project, and we're really hopeful that this will really help to contribute Europe to be more resilient to this kind of event.
My name is Justin Struan. I'm the Climate Action Project Manager at Philips. In this role, I contribute to Philips' climate ambitions. This includes the use of 100% renewable electricity within our operations, and it also, for example, includes achieving net zero emissions by 2045. It also includes making sure that we are prepared against any kind of climate-related risks. From that perspective, El Niño is a very tangible example of how near-term climate variability can expose real vulnerabilities in our global value chain. At Philips, physical climate risk management is not a future topic. It is an integrated part of our business continuity management program. That's because our business depends on complex global supply chains, manufacturing sites, and logistics networks. Events like El Niño show how climate variability, on top of an already warmer baseline and more risk-prone baseline, can trigger heat, drought, flooding, and supply chain disruptions. Importantly, these impacts do not stay local. They cascade across our value chain, meaning that although we might not have any direct exposures, we could face impacts throughout our value chain, both upstream with our suppliers and downstream with our customers. So physical climate-related risk is not just a sustainability and ESG issue. On the contrary, it's a core business continuity priority. We're embedding climate risks into our enterprise risk management program, aligned with ESRS E1, and integrating it into decision-making both at a local, at a site-specific level, and at a global level. Building the case for resilience investment starts with one thing: making climate-related risks tangible and decision-relevant. At Philips, we've embedded climate risk assessment directly into our business continuity management processes. This allows us to systematically assess exposures across our operations and our broader value chain. Most importantly, this directly links to our enterprise risk management framework. By standardizing this approach in alignment with our wider enterprise risk management framework, we are in a position of putting climate-related risks into the wider Philips risk landscape. This allows us to compare climate-related disruptions to other kinds of risks, for example, labor disputes, power outages. Let me be clear, we're still facing challenges as Philips. We haven't figured out how to assess climate change and the associated risks. Climate data comes with a lot of uncertainties. Resilience is often driven by avoided losses, and there's a need for strong cross-functional alignment to be able to ensure that we get the best prediction for our exposures and enable the best responses. Events like El Niño act as a real-world stress test. They shift the conversation towards near-term impacts, away from this long-term hypothetical scenario analysis. It becomes about here and now, what is our exposures? This is strengthening the case for investments associated with climate adaptation. And that is also why collaboration is key. Philips is joining Open Sesame because climate risks are systematic. They go beyond individual companies. It is not a Philips issue. It's not a Philips-specific domain. It is a sector-wide. It is a global issue. Through cross-sector collaboration around these risks, we aim to improve our risk visibility, translate resilience into specific actions, and connect finance and insurance solutions. For the value that comes from it is collective actions and collective adaptation and resilience. Ultimately, what we want to achieve is scale resilience across our value chain.
And thank you to our partners at WO and Firma and Philippe, and to all of you for listening in on this discussion. If there is one message to take away, it's that near-term climate signals like El Niño give businesses a really timely and urgent opportunity to test your resilience preparedness today and act before disruption materializes. This offers you an opportunity to test where you have visibility, where you need stronger preparedness, and where you may need to consider adapting decisions and systems across operations, sourcing, logistics, and finance. But there's only so much that companies can do individually. That's exactly why we launched Open Sesame, as Philippe introduced. Open Sesame is a joint initiative co-hosted by WBCSD and Firma with our joint membership to help close the climate resilience financing gap and connect this physical climate risk with resilience needs and finance. It is, in effect, to do together what no one can do alone. Open Sesame is designed to help organizations better understand and measure physical risk, articulate the value of resilience, and support more informed decisions on insurance, risk transfer, investment, and preventative action. We are all bringing together expertise from risk management, insurance, banking, corporates, and sustainable finance to build practical, decision-useful approaches that make resilience more measurable, investable, and scalable. Do please follow WBCSD's work on risk and resilience along with FIRMA, and join us in turning better climate risk insight into stronger business preparedness and more proactive investment in resilience. Thank you again for joining us. We'll speak to you soon.